Alrighty, guys, I am back. See if the camera is going to cooperate. If not, I might just have to go without camera on this. I am telling you, the Victus camera is so annoying. It's just bad. I guess I'm just gonna go without video on YouTube. You try to deactivate it and then reactivate it and see if that works. Yeah, it's like even that is not working. Okay, dang it. I'm just waiting for the camera because yeah, there it goes. Come on, dude. Victus, get it together. Okay, I'm gonna just dive into the show because I haven't got all night to troubleshoot my laptop camera. Like, come on. Just build better machines. That's all it takes. Build better machines. Alright, I will begin today's episode, much as I have done in the past, with a recap of the notes of the previous chapter. This will be taken from thebestnotes.com. You can follow along at home should you choose to do so. Um, Chapter 7 Before the War. Okay. I won't be doing the full summary, I'll just be doing the notes. And then I will cover the first half of chapter 8. Again, the game plan is that I will do Cider House rules each day of this week, Monday through Thursday, covering half chapters at a time. And then next week will be the finale, where I will cover the final 2 chapters of the book. And again, I'll be streaming Monday through Thursday of next week as well, because I'm making a big push to just finish out this book. Thank you all for joining me for another series here on the show. Okay, alright, here we go. Alright, this is the recap of chapter 7, Before the War. Both Homer and Melanie are struggling to leave St. Cloud's behind and adjust to their new lives. Both cannot help but remember where they've come from. Homer remembers Dickens. I have stood aside to see the phantoms of those days go by me. They are going, and I resume the journey of my story. And Melanie is touched by Bronte. I must part with you for my whole life. I must begin a new existence among strange faces and strange scenes. Both of these quotes speak of moving forward and breaking from the past. For Homer, this means breaking from Large and Large's work. For Melanie, this means forgetting about Homer and the promise he broke. This transition period is unsettling and even painful for both Homer and Melanie. The other issue this chapter touches on is that of race. At this time in the 1940s, there was a great division between the races. The trip to the Ferris wheel draws attention to this division. Homer and Mr. Rose are stared at, and Homer realizes that the stares he felt he received as an orphan paled in comparison to those Mr. Rose received. Homer also learns that it would not do any good for the other pickers to know about the Ferris wheel, as they would not have the opportunity to experience it because of the color of their skin. Homer can relate. The orphans at St. Cloud's would not have been able to experience it either. Again, also we see in this chapter again that Larch lives by his own rules. His rules allow him to create an elaborate fictitious history for a non-existent replacement in the hope that Homer will choose to return to St. Cloud's. Larch does this to protect the woman whom he serves. It also helps him cope with Homer's absence. And that's something we see Irving do time and again. He draws parallels. Parallels were drawn between the rich and the poor. Both were seeking abortions. It was like a type of equalizer. There was a parallel drawn between Off Harrison and St. Cloud's. People from either end of the economic spectrum seeking abortion-based services. So social classes are transcended, and parallels are drawn between the locations themselves and the availability of the services they provide. And yes, there are also parallels between Homer, the orphans, and colored folk. Yeah. And I mean, you can even draw parallels between the boys and the girls division, right? They're really not that different. Okay. All right. So we'll be picking up with chapter 8 of Cider House Rules. We'll stop at the halfway point to spare myself, basically, because these chapters are brutal. Like they are long. Irving was not known for his brevity. Okay. 330 is where chapter 8 begins, Opportunity Knock. And chapter 9 begins on page 386. So quick math. Let's see, that's 56. 56, half of 56 is 20, 28. Yeah, 28. So that would be 358. Then is the page that we will end for today on. And I can put my bookmark in there as a reminder. All right, that'll help keep me on track because again, these chapters are. Okay, I'm gonna get a quick drink of water before I begin because it's gonna help. Okay. After the harvest at York Farm, the foreman asked Melanie to stay on to help with the mousing. We have to get the mice before the ground freezes, or else they'll have the run of the orchards all winter, the foreman explained. The men use poison oats and poison corn, scattering the poison around the trees and putting it in the pine mice tunnels. Poor mice, thought Melanie, but she tried mousing for a few days. When she saw a pine mouse tunnel, she tried to conceal it. She never put any poison in it. She only pretended to scatter the oats and corn around the trees. She didn't like the way the poison smelled. She'd dump it into the dirt road, fill her bag with sand and gravel, and scatter that instead. Have a nice winter, mice, she whispered to them. It began to get very cold in the Cider house. He gave her a wood-burning stove, which Melanie vented through a window in the bunk room. The stove kept the toilet from freezing. The morning the outdoor shower was frozen with the morning was the morning Melanie decided to move on. She only briefly regretted not being able to stay and save more mice. If you're looking for another orchard, the foreman warned her, you won't find any that's hiring in the winter. I'd like a city job for the winter, Melanie told him. What city? The foreman asked. Melanie shrugged. She had securely strapped up her small bundle of things in Charlie's belt. The sleeves of Mrs. Grogan's coat reached only halfway down her forearms, and the coat was an especially tight fit across the shoulders and the hips. Even so, Melanie managed to look comfortable in it. There's no real cities in Maine, the foreman told her. It won't take much of a city to be a city for me, Melanie said. He watched her walk to the same part of the road where he'd called goodbye to her before. It was that time of the year when the trees are bare and the sky looks like lead, and underfoot the ground feels more like unyielding every day. Yet it's too early for snow. Also, there's a freak storm and the snow doesn't last. For some reason, the foreman felt a strong desire to leave with Melanie. He surprised himself by muttering out loud, I hope it snows soon. What? One of the Apple Mart women said. So long, the foreman called to Melanie, but she didn't answer him. Good riddance, said one of the women in the mart. A slut, another one said. What makes her a slut? The foreman said sharply. Who you seen her sleeping with? She's just a tramp, one of them said. At least she's interesting, the foreman snapped. The woman regarded him for a moment before one of them spoke up. Got a crush on you, do you? She asked. Bet you wish you was that boyfriend she's looking for, the woman said, which drew a teasing sort of laughter from all the Mart women. It's not that, the foreman snapped. Hope she never finds that boyfriend, for his sake, the foreman said, and for hers, he added. The woman whose fat husband had tried to rape Melanie turned away from this conversation. She opened the large communal thermos on the table next to the cash register. When she tried to pour herself some coffee, none came out. What came out instead was poisoned oats and poisoned corn. If Melanie had actually meant to poison any of them, she would have been more restrained in the proportions. It was clearly just a message. The Apple Mart women regarded it as silently as if they were trying to read bones. You see what I mean? Foreman asked them. He picked up an apple from a display basket on the counter and took a healthy chomp. The apple had been left out in the cold for so long that it was partially frozen, and so mealy in the foreman's mouth that he instantly spat it out. It was very cold on the road to the coast. Walking warmed Melanie up. Also, since there was no traffic, she had no choice about walking. When she reached the coastal highway, she didn't have to wait long for a ride. A pale but jolly boy driving a panel truck stopped for her. Yarmouth Paint and Shellick at your service, the boy said to Melanie. But he was a little younger than Homer Wells, and in Melanie's opinion, not nearly so worldly looking. The truck reeked of wood-stained smells and of varnishing creosote. I'm a wood treatment expert, the boy said to her proudly. At best, a salesman, Melanie thought, more likely a delivery boy. She smiled tightly, not showing her chipped teeth. The boy fidgeted, awaiting some form of greeting from her. I can make anyone nervous in less than a minute, Melanie thought. Where are you going? The boy asked her, the panel truck sloshing along. The city, Melanie said. What city? The boy asked. Now Melanie allowed her lips to part with her smile, a worried boy not staring at the troubled history of her mouth. You tell me, Melanie said. I gotta go to Bath, the boy said nervously. Melanie stared at him as if he'd said he'd had to have a bath. Bath, she repeated. It's a city, sort of, the wood treatment expert told her. It was Clara's city. Dr. Homer Wells would have told Melanie old Clara had come to St. Cloud's from Bath. But Melanie didn't know that, and wouldn't have cared. Her relationship to Clara had been unpleasantly envious. Homer Wells knew Clara more intimately than he knew Melanie. It might have interested Melanie that Bath would put her much closer to Ocean View than she'd been at York Farm. That there might be residents of Bath who would have heard of an Ocean View orchards. There were certainly many Bath residents who could have directed her to Hart's Haven or to Hart's Rock. You want to go to Bath? The boy asked her cautiously. Again, Melanie showed him her damaged teeth. She was displaying less of a smile than of the manner in which a dog might show its hackles. Right, she said. Wally came home for Thanksgiving. Andy had been home for several weekends in the early fall, but Homer had not known how to initiate seeing her without Wally. Wally was surprised that Homer and Candy had seen each other, and from Candy's embarrassment was Wally's surprise. Homer detected that she had been equally troubled about initiating a meeting with them. Turkey had to be basted every 15 minutes. The table had to be set, and Olive was too obviously enjoying having a full house again. There was no time to feel awkward. Raymond Kendall had shared a Thanksgiving dinner with the Worthingtons before, never without Senior's semi-presence. Raymond went through a few minutes of struggling to be overly polite before he relaxed and talked shop with Olive. Dad acts like he's having a date, Candy said to Olive in the kitchen. I'm flattered, Olive said, squeezing Candy's arm and laughing. But that was the end of any further nonsense. Homer volunteered to carve the turkey. He did such a good job that Olive said, You should be a surgeon, Homer. Wally laughed. Candy looked at her plate, or at her hands in her lap, and Ray Kendall said, Boy's just good with his hands. If you've got good hands, once you do a thing, your hands won't forget how. That's like you, Ray, Olive said, which moved the attention away from Homer's work with the knife. He carved every bit of meat off the bones as quickly as possible. Wally talked about the war. Said he thought about dropping out of college to go to flying school. So if there is a war, if we get into it, I mean, I'll already know how to fly. You'll do no such thing, Olive said to him. Why would you want to do such a thing? Candy asked him. I think you're being selfish. What do you mean selfish? Wally asked. A war's for your country. It's serving your country. To you, it's an adventure, Andy said. That's what's selfish about it. You'll do no such thing anyway, Olive repeated. I was too young to go to the last war, Ray said. And if there's another one, I'll be too old. Lucky you, Olive said. That's right, Candy said. Ray shrugged. I don't know, he said. I want to go to the last one. I tried to lie about my age, but someone told on me. Now you know better, Olive said. I'm not so sure about that, Ray said. If there's a new one, there'll be lots of new weapons. They're building stuff you can't even imagine. I try to imagine it, Wally said. Imagine the war all the time. Except the dying, Wally, Olive Worthington said, carrying the turkey carcass out to the kitchen. I don't think you've imagined the dying. Right, said Homer Wells, who imagined dying all the time. Candy looked at him and smiled. Should have called me on the weekends, Homer, she said. Yeah, why didn't you? Wally asked him. You're busy with Deborah Pettigrew, that's why. Homer just shook his head. Too busy with the practical anatomy of the rabbit, Olive called from the kitchen. But what? Wally said. But Olive was wrong. It had taken Homer only about 3 weeks of senior biology to realize that he knew more about the particular animal under scrutiny and its relation to human anatomy than he did to the average teacher, Mr. Hood. It was as Wilbur Larch could have guessed. The urogenital system had revealed Mr. Hood's deficiencies in comparison to the experience of young Dr. Wells. In discussing the 3 stages of specialization of the uterus, Mr. Hood became confused. The intrauterine life of the rabbit embryo is only 30 days. Between 5 to 8 young are born. In keeping with the primitive nature of the little animal, the rabbit has 2 complete uteri. The structure of the organ at this stage is called uterus duplex. The structure of the organ in the human female, which Homer Wells knew very well, wherein 2 uterine tubes fit into a single uterine cavity. It's called uterus simplex. The 3rd stage of the uterine structure falls between the two, a partially fused condition existing in some animals. Sheep, for example, which is called uterus bicornis. Cornis. I'm saying that right. Before Mr. Hood, attempting to reveal the secrets of the uterus upon the chalky blackboard, fused his duplex with his bicornis. He called a sheep a rabbit, and vice versa. It was a smaller error than if he'd imagined the human female had 2 complete uteri and had spread this misinformation to the class. But it was an error. Homer Wells caught it. It was the first time he'd been put in a position of correcting an authority. An orphan is especially uncomfortable and insecure in such a position, Dr. Wilbur Larch. Excuse me, sir? Said Homer Wells. Yes, Homer? Said Mr. Hood. His gauntness in a certain light made him appear as exposed as the many rabbit cadavers lying open on the students' laboratory tables. He looked skinned, almost ready for labeling. A kind of weary patience was in his eyes. For the man's only alert features. It's the other way around, sir, said Homer Wells. Pardon me, said Mr. Hood. The rabbit has 2 complete uteri. The rabbit is uterus duplex, not the sheep, sir, Homer said. Sheep's uterus is partially fused together. It's almost one. The sheep is uterus bicornis. The class waited. Mr. Hood blinked for a moment. He looked like a lizard regarding a fly, but he suddenly retreated. Isn't that what I said? He asked, smiling. No, the class murmured. You said it the other way around. Well, it's my mistake then, Mr. Hood said almost cheerfully. I meant it just the way you said it, Homer, he said. Maybe I misunderstood you, sir, Homer said. Class murmured, "No, you got it right." A short boy named Bucky, with whom Homer had to share his rabbit cadaver, nudged Homer in the ribs. "How come you know all about cunts?" he asked Homer. "Search me," said Homer Wells. He learned that phrase from Deborah Pettigrew. It was the one game they played. You'd ask her something she couldn't answer. She would say, "Search me." Homer Wells saying, "Okay," would begin to search her. Search her. "Not there," Deborah would cry, pushing his hand away but laughing. Always laughing but always pushing his hand away. There was no way Homer Wells would gain admittance to the uterus simplex of Deborah Pettigrew. "Unless I ask her to marry me," he told Wally when they were back together in Wally's bedroom, Thanksgiving night. "Wouldn't go that far, old boy," Wally said. Homer didn't tell Wally about embarrassing Mr. Hood, or how the man seemed changed by the incident. Mr. Hood had always been cadaverous. Now there was an insomnia about his presence, too. As if he were not only dead, but also working too hard, staying up late, boning up on his rabbit anatomy, trying to keep all the uteri straight. His tiredness made him slightly less cadaverous, but only because exhaustion is a life sign. It's at least some form of being human. Mr. Hood began to look as if he were waiting for his retirement, hoping that he could get there. "Where have I seen that look before?" wondered Homer Wells. Nurse Angela or Nurse Edna or even Mrs. Grogan could have reminded him. They're all familiar with that look, that strained combination of exhaustion and expectation, that fierce contradiction between grim anxiety and childlike faith. For years, that look had penetrated even the most innocent expressions of Wilbur Larch. Lately, Nurse Angela and Nurse Edna, and even Mrs. Grogan had recognized the look in their own expressions. "What are we waiting for?" Nurse Edna asked Nurse Angela one morning. There was an aura of something pending, some form of inevitable change. These good women were insulated by the now famous Good-Gingrich questionnaire, as they felt sure Dr. Larch had been. Larch did seem unusually cheered by the remarks of the former Snowy Meadows. The board had thought Snowy's response was so praiseworthy that they'd sent it along for Dr. Larch to see. The question of being properly supervised, Snowy said, that Dr. Larch and the nurses never let him out of their sight. The question regarding whether or not the medical attention was adequate, Snowy Meadows advised the board to just ask Fuzzy Stone. In Snowy's opinion, Dr. Larch had breathed for Fuzzy. "You never heard a worse set of lungs," said Snowy Meadows. Little Larch just hooked up the kid to a real lifesaver. In the question of whether or not the foster home was carefully and correctly chosen, Snowy Meadows claimed that Dr. Larch was a genius at this delicate guesswork. How could the guy have known that I was going to fit right in with a furniture family? Well, I'm telling you, he did know. Snowy Meadows, now Robert Marsh, wrote to the board. Private property, the world of personal possessions. That doesn't mean the world to everybody. But let me tell you, Snowy Meadows said, furniture means the world to an orphan. One of you must have dropped that boy on his head, Wilbur Larch said to Nurse Edna and Nurse Angela, although they could tell he was very pleased by Snowy's remarks. Just to be fair, the board sent Larch Curly Day's slightly less enthusiastic response to the questionnaire. Roy Renfred of Booth Bay was seething with resentment. "I was no more prepared to be adopted by druggists than I was prepared to have my belly cord cut," wrote Roy Curly Renfred. "The most beautiful couple in the world walked off with someone who didn't even need or want to be adopted, and I got nabbed by druggists," Curly complained. "You call it being supervised when little children are stumbling over dead bodies?" Curly Day asked the board. "Imagine this. On the day I find a dead man in the grass, the couple of my dreams adopt someone else. Dr. Larch tells me that an orphanage is not a pet store. Shortly thereafter, two druggists hire me to work in their drugstore for free. And you call that being adopted?" "Or that ungrateful little snot," said Nurse Angela. "Why, Curly Day, aren't you ashamed?" Nurse Edna asked the indifferent air. "If that boy were here," Nurse Angela said, "I'd take him over my knee, I would." Why hasn't our Homer Wells filled out the questionnaire? The woman wondered. Speaking of ungrateful, thought Wilbur Larch, although he held his tongue. Nurse Angela did not hold hers. She wrote directly to Homer Wells, which would have irritated Dr. Larch if he'd known. Nurse Angela came right to the point. "That questionnaire is the least you could do," she wrote Homer. "We all could use a little support. Just because you're having the time of your life, I suppose, don't you dare forget how to be of use. Don't you forget where you belong. If you happen to run into any young doctors or nurses who would be sympathetic to our situation, I think you know that you'd better recommend us to them, and not us. We're not getting any younger, you know. My dear Homer, wrote Dr. Larch in the next day's mail. Come to my attention that the Board of Trustees is attempting to communicate with several former residents of St. Cloud's in the form of a ridiculous questionnaire. Answer it as you see fit. Please do answer it. You must be prepared for some other more troubling correspondence from them. It was necessary for me to be frank with them regarding the health of the orphans. Although I saw no reason to tell them I had lost Fuzzy Stone to a respiratory ailment. What good would that admission do Fuzzy? I did tell the board about your heart. I felt that if anything ever happened to me, there should be someone who knew. I do apologize for not telling you about your condition. I'm telling you now because reconsidering the matter, I would never want you to hear about your heart from someone else first. Now, don't be alarmed. Not even describe your heart as a condition. The condition is so slight. You had a fairly substantial heart murmur as a small child. This had almost entirely disappeared when I last checked you in your sleep. I don't remember. I delayed even mentioning your heart to you for fear of worrying you needlessly. Such worrying might aggravate the condition. You have or had a pulmonary valve stenosis, but please don't worry. It's nothing, next to nothing. If you're interested in more details, I can provide them. For now, I just didn't want you to be upset by some fool thing you might hear from that fool board of trustees. Aside from avoiding any situation of extreme stress or extreme exertion, I want you to know that you can almost certainly lead a normal life. Normal life? Thought Homer Wells. I'm a bedouin with a heart condition, and Dr. Larch is telling me I can lead a normal life. I'm in love with my best and only friend's girlfriend. Is that what Larch would call extreme stress? And what was Melanie to me if not extreme exertion? Whenever Homer Wells thought of Melanie, which was not often, he missed her. Then he was angry at himself. Why should I miss her? He wondered. He tried not to think about St. Cloud's. The longer he stayed away, the more extreme life appeared there to him. Yet when he thought of it, he missed it too. And Nurse Angela, Nurse Edna, and Mrs. Grogan and Dr. Larch, he missed them all. He was angry at himself for that too. There were absolutely no signals from his heart to tell him that the life at St. Cloud's was the life he wanted. He liked the life at Ocean View. He wanted Candy and some life with her. When she went back to Camden, he tried not to think about her. Since he could not think of Wally without thinking of Candy, he was relieved when Wally went back to Orano. Although he had missed Wally all that fall. When an orphan is depressed, from Wilbur Larch, he is attracted to telling lies. A lie is at least a vigorous enterprise. It keeps you on your toes by making you suddenly responsible for what happens because of it. You must be alert to lie, and stay alert to keep your lie a secret. Friends are not the masters of their fates. They're the last to believe you if you tell them that other people are also not in charge of theirs. When you lie, it makes you feel in charge of your life. Telling lies is very seductive to orphans. I know, Dr. Larch wrote. I know because I tell them too. I love to lie. When you lie, you feel as if you've cheated fate, your own, and everybody else's. So Homer Wells answered the questionnaire. He sang on a hymn of praise to St. Cloud's. He mentioned the restoration of the abandoned buildings of St. Cloud's as one of the many attempts made to integrate the daily life of the orphanage with the life of the surrounding community. He also lied to Nurse Angela, but it was just a little lie. One of those that are intended to make other people feel better. He wrote to her that he lost the original questionnaire, which was only the only reason he'd been so tardy in returning it. Perhaps the board would be kind enough to send him another. When he received the second questionnaire from the board, he would know it was time to send the one he had so arduously filled out. That way he would appear to have filled it out spontaneously, off the top of his head. He wrote with feigned calmness to Dr. Larch. He would appreciate further details regarding the pulmonary valve stenosis. Did Dr. Larch think it necessary, for example, for Homer to have monthly checkups? Dr. Larch would think it unnecessary, of course. Stupid fly. Get away, you stupid thing. Gosh dang, I'm trying to read this chapter. It's attracted to light or something. Gosh dang, it's so annoying. Alright, the board would be kind enough to send him another. When he received the second question from the board, he would know it was time to send the one he had so archly filled out. Start with faint calmness, Dr. Large. She'd appreciate further details regarding his pulmonary valve stenosis. Did Dr. Large think it necessary, for example, for Homer to have monthly checkups? Dr. Large would think it unnecessary, of course. There are the signs of trouble that Homer himself might detect. There are ways that he could listen, or is perhaps a returning murmur. Calm yourself, Dr. Large would advise. That was the best thing, staying calm. And let's not forget, it's not just Irving's writing style, it's also all the medical terminology. It's like, unless you're a doctor, and even if you are a doctor, you're like, for to calm himself. Homer tacked the extra questionnaire, which he did not fill out, to the wall of Wally's room, right by the light switch, so that the questions regarding life at St. Cloud's occupied a position of ignored authority, quite similar to the page of rules that were yearly tacked up in the cider house. As Homer came and went, he regarded those questions he had answered with such able eyes. For example, it was quite a kick for him to contemplate any possible improvements in the methods and management of St. Cloud's each time he entered and left Wally's room. At night, now, Homer's insomnia kept time to a new music. The winter branches of the picked apple trees rattling against each other in the early December wind made a brittle click-clack sound. Lying in his bed, a moonlight of the colored bones starkly outlining his hands folded on his chest. Homer Walls thought the trees might be trying to take the snow off their branches in advance of the snow itself. Get away! Get... Oh, annoying. Anyway, have about 10 pages left. I'm telling you, it's like the flies know summer's ending, so they're like everywhere. Get the heck away from me if you're a fly. Get away. And someone's letting him in. It's not me. The trees knew that war was coming too. Olive Worthington didn't think about it. She had heard the orchard's winter rattle for many years. She had seen the winter branches bare, then lacy with snow, and then bare again. The coast winds gave the brittle orchard such a shaking that the clashing trees resembled frozen soldiers in all the postures of saber rattling. Olive had heard so many years of the season that she never knew a war was coming. The trees seemed especially naked to her that December. She thought it was because she faced her first winter without Senior. Brimstone looked for signs in the familiar, and over large in a brief history of St. Cloud's. The orphan is always looking for signs. Homer Wells at Wally's window searched the skeletal orchard for the future, his own mainly, but Candy's too, and Wally's. Get away, man. And that's not in the book. That's just that fly that's going bananas for some reason. It's a big old horsefly too. Get away, man. Flies are just such dreadful creatures, aren't they? This is an aside, by the way. This is not in the book. They land on everything. That's like they're spreaders of disease. It's like, gosh, dang it, dude. You got to shut the door when you're going in and out during the day. And if you see the fly, try to get it back outside. I'm I've tried, but some of them are just too skittish. You can't. You gotta have one of those fly swatters. And then you splat them, and then they got their guts everywhere, and it just makes an even bigger mess. I mean, they're just abhorrent creatures, really. I hate flies. They're so dumb. Not as much as mosquitoes, but not much better. Okay. Okay, where was it? The coast winds gave the brittle orchard such a shaking that the clashing trees resembled frozen soldiers in all the postures of saber rattling. Olive had heard so many years of the season that she never knew a war was coming. The trees seemed especially naked to her that December. She thought it was because she faced her first winter without Senior. Grown-ups don't look for signs in the familiar, noted Dr. Wilbur Larch in A Brief History of St. Cloud's, but an orphan is always looking for signs. Homer Wells at Wally's window searched the skeletal orchard for the future, his own mainly, but Candy's too, and Wally's. Yeah, sorry, I already read this, but I lost my place because of the stupid fly. Okay. But Sir Large's future was certainly out there too, in those winter branches, even Melanie's future. What future would there be for the Lord's work? Wondered Homer Wells. The war that was about to be did not announce itself in signs that sang clouds. The familiar and the unfamiliar were muted, there by ritual and by custom. Pregnancy terminated in a birth or in an abortion. An orphan was adopted or was waiting to be adopted. When there was a dry and snowless cold, the loose sawdust irritated the eyes and the noses of the throats of St. Clouds. When the snow lay newly fallen, was the sawdust gone from the air. When there was a thaw, the snow melted down and the matted sawdust smelled like wet fur. When there was a freeze, the sawdust reappeared, dry again, somehow on top of the old snow. And again, the eyes itched, the nose ran, and throats could never quite clear themselves of it. Let us be happy for smoky fields. Dr. Larch announced in the boys' division. Smoky Fields has found a family. Good night, Smoky. Good night, Smoky, said David Copperfield. Good night, young Steerforth cried. Good night, you little food hoarder, Nurse Angela thought. Whoever took him, she knew, would soon learn to lock the refrigerator. The December morning at the window where Melanie once allowed the world to pass both with and without comment, Mary Agnes Quirk watched the women walking uphill from the train station. They don't look pregnant, Mary Agnes thought. On the bleak hill where Wally Worthington once imagined apple trees, young Copperfield attempted to steer a cardboard carton through the first wet snow. The carton had once contained 400 sterile vulval pads. Copperfield knew this because he had unpacked the carton, and he placed young Steerforth in the carton at the bottom of the hill. Near the top, he was beginning to realize his mistake. Not only had dragging Steerforth uphill been difficult, but also the boy's weight, in addition to the wetness of the snow, had turned the bottom of the carton soggy. Copperfield wondered if his made-do sled would even slide. He ever imagined to get the mess to the top. Good night, Smoky, Steerforth was singing. Shut up, stupid, Copperfield said. Dr. Larch was very tired. He was resting in the dispensary. Gray winter light turned the white walls gray. For a moment, Larch wondered what time of day it was. What time of year? From now on, he was thinking, let everything I do be for a reason. Let me make no wasted moves. In his mind's eye, he saw the correct angle, which the vaginal speculum allowed him a perfect view of the cervix. Whose cervix? He wondered. Even in his ether sleep, the thumb and index finger of his right hand tightened the screw that held the jaws of the speculum in place. He saw the astonishing blondness of the little clump of pubic hair caught in the hairs of his own wrist. So blond he nearly missed seeing it against his own pale skin. When he shook his wrist, the little clump was so light that it floated in the air. In his ether swoon, his left hand reached for it, just missing it. Oh yes, her cervix, thought Wilbur Larch. What was her name? She has a toy name, Larch said aloud. Candy, he remembered. And he laughed. Nurse Edna, passing the dispensary, held her breath and listened to the laughter. Even when she didn't breathe, the fumes made her old eyes water. That and the sawdust. That and the orphan. Some of them made her eyes water too. She opened the door at the hospital entrance to let some fresh air into the hall. On the hill, she watched a cardboard carton make an unsteady descent. She knew that the sterile vulval pads had been in the carton, but she wasn't sure what was in the carton now. Something heavy, because the carton's descent was clumsy and irregular. At times it picked up speed, sliding almost smoothly, but always some rock or bare patch in the slushy snow would draw it off course and slow it down. The first small body to roll out of the carton and make its way downhill was Steerforth's. She recognized his overlarge mittens and the ski hat that always covered his eyes. For a while he tumbled almost as fast as the carton, but a large patch of bare, frozen ground finally stopped him. Nurse Edna watched him climb back uphill for one of his mittens. The second larger body to be propelled from the carton was obviously David Copperfield's. He rolled free with a large, soggy piece of the carton in both hands. The carton appeared to disintegrate in flight. Copperfield cried. At least, Nurse Edna thought, young Copperfield's profanities were improved by his lisp. Close that door, said Dr. Larch in the hall behind Nurse Edna. I was just trying to get some fresh air, Nurse Edna said pointedly. Could have fooled me, said Wilbur Larch. I thought you were trying to freeze the unborn. Maybe that will be a way of the future, Nurse Edna thought. Wondering what future ways there would be. think far less wordy, Nurse Edna. But anyway, the December swimming pool of the raft that Senior Worthington used to ride still floated, wind blown from one end of the pool to the other, breaking up the lacy fringes of ice that formed and reformed around the edges. All of it Homer had drained out a third of the pool's water, leaving room for rainfall and snowmelt. Senior's coal raft, only partially deflated by the falling temperature, still charged around the swimming pool like a riderless horse. He galloped wherever the wind urged it. Every day, Olive watched the raft out of the kitchen window, and Homer wondered when she would suggest getting rid of it. One weekend, Candy came home from Camden. Homer's confusion regarding what he should do about her mounted. Friday was a bad, indecisive day. He went early to senior biology, hoping to persuade Mr. Hood either to let him have his own rabbit for dissection or assign him a lab partner other than that boy Bucky. Bucky managed to mangle the rabbit's innards whenever he handled them. Homer found the oaf's constant fixation with everything reproductive system both silly and maddening. Bucky had lately seized on the fact that marsupials have paired vaginas. Twin twats, can you believe it? Bucky asked Homer. Right, said Homer Wells. Is that all you could say? Bucky asked. Don't you get it? If you was a hamster, you could fuck another hamster with your buddy. Why would I want to do that? Homer asked. Because, Bucky said enthusiastically, you got no imagination. I mean, he's quite the poet, isn't he? Anyway, I doubt that even the hamsters are interested in what you suggest, said Homer Wells. That's what I mean, stupid, Bucky said. What a waste. Two twats to a hamster. You ever seen them run on them little wheels? They're crazy. Would you be crazy if you knew the girl of your dreams had two twats and she still wasn't interested? They'd have a bunch of energy, Bucky. Okay? The girl of my dreams, said Homer Wells. It was crazy enough, in Homer's opinion, that the girl of his dreams had two people who loved her. Isn't that how it always goes, though? Chances are, if he likes her, there's at least one other boy who does. Okay? So he went to senior biology to request a fresh rabbit or replacement for the obsessed boy named Bucky. There was a geography class in progress when he got there, and when the class was released, Homer saw that the large maps of the world were still pulled down, covering the blackboard. Can you just look at the maps for a moment before my next class? Homer asked the geography teacher. I'll roll them back up for you. And so he was left alone with the first accurate view of the worlds, the whole world, albeit unrealistically flat against the backboard. After a while, he found Maine. He regarded how small it was. After a while, he found South Carolina. He'd stared into South Carolina for a long time, as if the exact whereabouts of Mr. Rose and the other migrants would materialize. He had heard all the talk about Germany, which was easier to find than Maine. He was surprised at the size of England. Charles Dickens had given him the impression of something much bigger. And the ocean that seemed so vast when you looked at it off Ray Kendall's dock, why the oceans of the world were even more vast than he'd imagined. St. Clouds, which loomed so large in Homer's life, could not be located on the map of Maine. He was using the geography teacher's magnifying glass when he suddenly realized that the entire class of senior biology had filled the seats behind him. Mr. Hood was regarding him strangely. "And for your rabbit, Homer?" Mr. Hood asked. The class enjoyed this joke enormously, and Homer realized that he had, at least for a day, lost the opportunity to rid himself of Bucky. "Look at it this way," Bucky whispered to him at the end of class. "If Deborah Pettigrew had two twats, she might let you in one of them. See the advantages?" Unfortunately, the idea of paired vaginas troubled Homer throughout his Friday evening date with Deborah Pettigrew. There was a Fred Astaire movie in Bath, but that was almost an hour-long drive each way, and what did Homer Wells know or care about dancing? He declined several invitations to attend Deborah's dancing class with her. If she wanted to see the Fred Astaire movie, Homer thought she could go with someone who was in her dancing class. It was getting too cold simply to drive down to the beach and park there. Olive was generous about letting Homer use the van. Soon there would be no gas rationing and a welcome end, in Homer's opinion, to all this restless driving. He drove Deborah Pettigrew out to the carnival site at Cape Kenneth. In the moonlight, the abandoned, unlighted Ferris wheel stood out like scaffolding for the world's first rocket launch, or like the bones of some species from dinosaur times. Homer tried to tell Deborah about the knife work of Mr. Rose, but she had her heart set on Fred Astaire. He knew better than to waste a good story on her when he was sulking. They drove to the Cape Kenneth drive-in, which was closed for the season. They appeared to be reviewing the scenes of a romance that happened to other people, not just last summer, but to another generation. I know what you got against dancing, Deborah said. I don't know either, said Homer Wells. It was still clearly when he drove Deborah to her winter home in Kenneth Corners. The same ferocious dogs of the summer were there, with their coats grown thicker, with their hot breath icing on their muzzles. There had been talk between Deborah and Homer earlier about using the summer house on Drinkwater Lake for some kind of party. The house would be unheated, and they would have to keep the lights off, or someone might report breaking and entering. Despite these discomforts, surely there was the thrill of being unchaperoned. Why? Wondered Homer Wells. He knew he still wouldn't get Deborah Pettigrew, even if she had two vaginas. Still, Friday evening they had spent together, and with the dog's breath crystallizing on the driver's side window of the van, there was no talk about such a tempting party this night. So what are you doing tomorrow night? Deborah asked, sighing. I watched the dog gnaw at his side view mirror. Well, I was going to see Candy. She's home from Camden, Homer said. I haven't seen her on a weekend all fall. And Wally did ask me to look after her. Going to see her without Wally? Deborah asked. Right, Homer said. They are so snub-nosed that the dogs could hurl themselves directly against the windshield without having to clamber over the hood. Big Dog's paws raked one of the windshield wipers away from the windshield, releasing it with a crack. Like to bend. It wouldn't quite touch the surface of the glass anymore. I'm going to see her alone, Homer said. Or with her dad, Homer said. Sure, said Deborah Pettigrew, getting out of the van. She left the door open a little bit too long. The dog with a spade-shaped head of a Doberman charged the open door. It was half in the van, its heavy chest heaving against the passenger side seat, its frosty muzzle drooling on the gift ship box. When Deborah grabbed it by the ear and yanked it back, yelping, out of the van. So long, said Homer Wells softly, after the door had slammed, after he had let the dog's frothy slobber off the gearship knob. He drove by Kendall's Lobster Pound twice. There was nothing to tell him whether Candy was home. On weekends when she came home, she took the train. Then Ray drove her back on Sunday. Call her tomorrow, Saturday, Homer thought. When Candy said that she wanted to see the Fred Astaire movie, Homer had no objections. I was wanting to see him, he said. Bath, after all, was less than an hour away. On the bridge across the Kennebec River, they could see several big ships in the water and several more in dry dock. The Bath shipyards were sprawled along the shore, rhythmic hammering and other metal sounds audible even on Saturday. They were much too early for a movie. They were looking for an Italian restaurant that Ray had told them about. It was still there. Ray McCandle hadn't been in Bath in years. 1940, especially to an outsider, the city seemed dominated by the shipyards, and by the ships that stood taller than the shipyard buildings, by the bridges that spanned the Kennebec River. Bath was a working man's town, as Melanie soon discovered. She found a job in the shipyards and began her winter employment on an assembly line, working with other women, with an occasional handicapped man, on the second floor of the factory specializing in movable parts. The movable part to which Melanie would devote her energies for the first month of her employment was a hexagonal-shaped sprocket that looked half like a ham. Split open lengthwise, Melanie did not know the whereabouts of the assembly line that dealt with the other half of the ham. Sprocket arrived on the conveyor belt in front of her, pausing there for exactly 45 seconds before it was moved on and replaced by a new sprocket. The joint of the sprocket was packed with grease. You could stick your finger in the grease, past the second buckle. The job was to insert 6 ball bearings into the grease-packed joint. You pushed each ball bearing into the grease until you felt it hit the bottom. All 6 fit perfectly. The trick was to get only one hand greasy. A clean hand had an easier time handling the clean ball bearings, which were the size of marbles. The other part of the job was making sure the 6 ball bearings were perfect. Perfectly round, perfectly smooth. No dents, no jagged metal scraps stuck to them. The odds were that 1 out of every 200 ball bearings had something wrong with it. At the end of the day, you turned the ball in the bad ball bearings. If you had a day with no bad ball bearings, the foreman told you that you weren't looking each ball bearing over carefully enough. You could sit or stand, and Melanie tried both positions, alternating through them throughout the day. The belt was too high to make sitting comfortable, and too low to make standing any better. Your back hurt in one place when you stood, and in another place when you sat. Not only did Melanie not know who did what, where, to the other half of the sprocket, she also didn't know what the sprocket was for. What's more, she didn't care. But for 2 weeks, she had the routine down pat. In 26 and 28 seconds to insert the ball bearings. Never more than 10 seconds to pick 6 perfect ball bearings. She learned to keep a nest of ball bearings in her lap when she sat, and in an ashtray. She didn't smoke. When she stood, that way she always had a ball bearing handy in case she dropped one. She had a 12 to 14-second rest between sprockets, during which time she could look at the person on her left and at the person on her right. Shut her eyes and count to 3 or sometimes 5. She observed that there were 2 styles of labor on the line. Some of the workers picked their 6 perfect ball bearings immediately upon finishing a sprocket. The others waited for a new sprocket to arrive first. Melanie found faults with both styles. The woman next to Melanie put it this way: "Some of us are pickers and some are stickers," she said. "I'm not either, or I'm both," Melanie said. "I think you'll have an easier time of it, dearie, if you make up your mind," the woman said. Her name was Doris. She had 3 children. One side of her face was still pretty, but the other was marred by a mole with whiskers in it. The 12 or 14 seconds that Doris had between sprockets, she smoked. The other side of Melanie was an elderly man with a wheelchair. In a wheelchair. His problem was that he could not pick up the ball bearings that he had dropped. Some of them got caught in his lab blanket or in the wheelchair apparatus, which caused him to rattle when he wheeled himself off for his coffee break or for lunch. His name was Walter. 3 or 4 times a day, Walter would shout, "Fucking ball bearings!" Some days when someone was sick, the assembly line was reassembled with Melanie, and Melanie was not pinned between Walter and Doris. Just, that's probably my main criticism of Irving. He just has like such a gratuitous level of description. It's like, dude, who really gave that much of a care about ball bearings? Who even mechanics are like, dude, it's just annoying, dude. It's obnoxious. Anyway, um, yeah, sometimes she got to be next to Troy, who was blind. He felt the ball bearings for perfection and daintily poked them into the thick and unseen grease. He's a little older than Melanie. He always worked in the shipyards. He'd been blinded in a welding accident, and the shipyards owed him a job for life. He used to have God security, you'd say 3 or 4 times a day. Some days Melanie was put next to a girl about her age, feisty little chick named called Lorna. "There's worse jobs," Lorna said one day. "Name one," said Melanie. "Blowing bulldogs," Lorna said. "I don't know about that," Melanie said. "I'll bet every bulldog is different." "Then how come every man's the same?" Lorna asked. Melanie decided that she liked Lorna. Lorna had been married when she was 17 to an older man, she said, but it hadn't worked out. He was a garage mechanic, about 21, Lorna said. "Just married me because I was the first person he slept with," Lorna told Melanie. Melanie told Lorna she'd been separated from her boyfriend by a rich girl who came between us. Lorna agreed that this was the worst. "But I figure one of 2 things happened," Melanie said. "Either he still hasn't fucked her because she hasn't let him, and so he's figured out what he's missing, or else he let him fuck her, in which case he's figured out what he's missing." "Ah, that's right," Lorna said. She appeared to like Melanie. "I got some friends," she told Melanie. "We eat pizza, go to movies, you know." Melanie nodded. She had done none of those things. Lorna was as thin as Melanie was thick. She showed as much bone as Melanie showed flesh. Lorna was pale and blonde, whereas Melanie was dark and darker. Lorna looked frail and she coughed a lot, whereas Melanie looked almost strong as she was, and her lungs were a set of engines. The women felt like they belonged together. When they requested that they be put next to each other on the assembly line, their request was denied. Friendships, especially talkative ones, were considered counterproductive on the line. Thus, Melanie was allowed to work alongside Lorna only when the line was reassembled on a sick day. Melanie was made to endure the crackpot homilies of Doris and the lost ball bearings of wheelchair Walter, as everyone called him. But the enforced separation from Lorna on the work line only made Melanie feel stronger in her attachment. The attachment was mutual. That Saturday, they put in for overtime together, and they worked side by side through the afternoon. About the time that Candy and Homer Wells were crossing the bridge over the Kennebec, driving into downtown Bath, Lorna dropped a ball bearing down the cleavage of Melanie's work shirt. It was their way of getting each other's attention. "There's a Fred Astaire movie in town," Lorna said, snapping her chewing gum. "You want to see it?" This is what they call foreshadowing. So who do you think they're going to see? You got it, Homer Wells. Homer Wells is going to be there, and it's going to be some kind of drama. Okay. Although her voice lacked the studied, I don't know, it's about time, right? Something interesting happened in this book. Although her voice lacked the studied heartiness of Dr. Larch's, Mrs. Grogan did her best to inspire a welcome response to her announcement to the girls' division. Let us be happy for Mary Agnes Cork, she said. There was a general sniveling, but Mrs. Grogan pressed on. Mary Agnes Cork has found a family. Good night, Mary Agnes. There were stifled moans and the sound of someone gagging in her pillow, and a few of the usual racking sobs. Let us be happy for Mary Agnes Cork, Mrs. Grogan pleaded. Fuck you, said someone in the darkness. Can't imagine why they would have said that. Right, anyway. It hurts me to hear you say that, Mrs. Grogan said. How that hurts us all. Good night, Mary Agnes, Mrs. Grogan called. Good night, Mary Agnes, one of the smaller ones said. Be careful, Mary Agnes, someone blubbered. Goodness, yes, thought Mrs. Grogan, the tears running down her cheeks. Be careful. She had assured Mrs. Grogan that the adoptive family was especially good for an older girl like Mary Agnes. They were a young couple who bought and sold and restored antiques. They were too active in their business to look after a small child, but they had a lot of energy to share with an older child on the weekends and in the evenings. The young wife had been very close to a kid sister. She was devoted to girl talk, she told Dr. Larch. Apparently, the kid sister had married a foreigner and was now living abroad. Wilbur Larch had a good feeling for Bath. He'd always maintained a friendly correspondence with the pathologist at Bath Hospital. Good old Clara had come from there. It seemed perfectly fine to him that Mary Agnes Cork had gone to Bath. Mary Agnes was attached to her own name, but they allowed her to keep it, not just the Mary Agnes, but the Cork, too. After all, they were the Callahans. Cork went with a Callahan, didn't it? Sounded a little modern for Mrs. Grogan's taste. Well, she allowed herself to be pleased with the thought that she named someone for keeps. Ted and Patty Callahan wanted Mary Agnes Cork to view them as friends. First friendly thing the young couple did was to take Mary Agnes to her first movie. They were a robust couple, and they were paying to live near enough to the movie theater in Bath to take a walk. It was a long walk, during which Ted and Patty demonstrated some of the basic differences between a foxtrot and a waltz. The December sidewalk was sloppy. Ted and Patty wanted to prepare Mary Agnes for some of the dazzle of Fred Astaire. Off the Kennebec, a damp, chilling wind was blowing. Mary Agnes felt her collarbone ache. When she tried to join the Callahans at dancing, the old injury felt loose. It throbbed, then it grew numb. The sidewalk was so slippery she nearly fell, catching her balance on the fender of a dirty green van. Patty brushed her coat off for her. People were outside the movie house, buying tickets in the failing light. On the sliding panel door of the van, Mary Agnes Cork recognized the Apple monogram, the WW, and the overview. She had first seen this emblem on a Cadillac. There had been a kind of hunger line. She remembered that a beautiful girl standing aloof and that beautiful boy passing out food. They're here, Mary Agnes thought. The beautiful people who took Homer Wells away. Maybe Homer was still with them. Mary Agnes began to look around. It's, of course, Wally and Candy. Homer and Candy had not much luck finding the Italian restaurant that Ray had recommended. They found 2 or 3 Italian restaurants, each one serving pizza and submarine sandwiches and beer, each one so overwhelmed with workers from the shipyards that there was no place to sit. They'd eaten some pizza in the van and had arrived in the movie early. When Homer Wells opened his wallet in front of the ticket booth, he realized that he'd never opened his wallet outdoors, in a winter wind before. He put his back to the wind, but still the loose bills flapped. Candy cupped her hands on either side of his wallet, as if she were protecting a flame in danger of going out. That's how she was in a position to catch her own treasured clump of pubic hair when it blew free from Homer's wallet and caught on the cuff of her coat. They both grabbed for it, Homer letting the wallet fall. Candy was quicker. Some of the fine blonde hairs may have escaped in the wind. Candy seized the clump tightly, Homer's hand closing immediately on hers. So not Wally, but Homer. It was just the memory of Wally. They stepped away from the ticket booth. A small line moved into the theater past them. Candy continued to hold her pubic hair tightly. Again, just weird Irvingisms. Like the undergarments. Okay. Moore would not let her hand go. He would not let her open hand to. He would not let her open her hand to examine what she held. There was no need for that. Candy knew what she held in her hand. She knew it as much as from Homer's expression as from the clump of pubic hair itself. I'd like to take a walk, she whispered. Right, said Homer Wells, not letting go of her hand. They turned away from the theater and walked downhill to Kennebec. Candy faced the river and leaned against Homer Wells. Perhaps you're a collector, she said, as quietly as she could speak and still be heard over the river. Perhaps you're a pubic hair collector, she said. You certainly weren't in a position to be. Yeah, well, of course. Because who isn't, right? I mean, everyone's like busy talking about the wild parties that Diddy had, and meanwhile, Irving's over here talking about guys who collect pubic hair. I'm like, okay, dude, okay. No, he said. This is pubic hair, she said, wriggling her tightly clenched fist in his hand. And it's mine, right? Right, said Homer Wells. Only mine? Candy asked. You kept only mine? Right, Homer said. Why? Candy asked. Don't lie. You ever see like Hey Arnold? Not like that. Like Helga's like sick fascination with Arnold. He never said the words, I'm in love with you. He's unprepared for the struggle involved in saying them. No doubt he misunderstood the unfamiliar weight he felt upon his heart. He must have associated the constriction of that big muscle in his chest with Dr. Larcher's recent news. What he felt was only love, but what he thought he felt was his pulmonary valve stenosis. He let go of Candy's hand and put both his hands to his chest. He'd seen the sternum shears at work, knew the autopsy procedure, but never had it been so hard and painful to breathe. Candy turned to him and saw his face. She couldn't help it. Both her hands opening, grasped his hands. The blonde wisp of pubic hair flying free. Current of rough hair faded out over the river and into the darkness. Is it your heart? Candy asked him. Oh, God. You don't have to say anything. Please, don't even think about it. My heart, he said. You know about my heart? You know, she asked. Don't worry. She added fiercely. I love you, Homer Wells croaked, as if he were saying his last words. Yes, I know. Don't think about it, Candy said. Don't worry about anything. I love you too. You do? He asked. Yes, yes, and Wally too, she said. I love you and I love Wally. Don't worry about it. Don't even think about it. How do you know about my heart? Asked the Wells. Dr. Large said something. We all know about it, Candy said. Olive knows and Wally knows. Hearing this was more convincing to Homer Wells than even the offhand remarks in Dr. Larch's letter. He felt his heart race out of control again. Don't think about your heart, Homer, Candy said, hugging him tightly. Don't worry about me or Wally or any of it. What am I supposed to think about? Asked Homer Wells. Only good things, Candy told him. When she looked into his eyes, she said suddenly, I can't believe that you kept my hair. She saw the intensity of his frown. She said, I mean, it's okay. I understand, I guess. Don't worry about it, either. Maybe peculiar, but it's certainly romantic. Romantic, said Homer Wells, holding the girl of his dreams. Only holding her. To touch her more would be forbidden, surely, by all the rules, and so he tried to accept the ache in his heart as what Dr. Larch would call the common symptoms of a normal life. This is a normal life, he tried to think, holding Candy as both the night fog off the river and the darkness reached over them. It's not a night that put them in the mood for a musical. See Fred Astaire dance another time, Candy said philosophically. Safety of the familiar drew them toward Raymond Kendall's dock. It got cold sitting out there. They could always have some tea with Ray. He rode the van back to Heart's Haven. Nobody who knew them saw them come or go. In the Fred Astaire movie, Mary Agnes Cork ate too much popcorn. Her foster family thought that the poor girl was simply overstimulated by her first movie. Did not sit still. She watched the audience more than she watched the dancing. She searched every face in the flickering darkness. It was that maybe the pretty girl and the pretty boy she was looking for. And maybe Homer Wells. So she was unprepared to spot the face in the crowd of the one person she missed most in her narrow world. Sight of that dark, heavy countenance shot such a stab of pain through her old collarbone injury that the popcorn container flew from her hands. Ronnie loomed over the sassy blonde girl named Lorna, looking in her seat with the authority of a chronic and cynical moviegoer, looking like a sour critic born to be displeased, although this was her first movie. Even in the projector's great light, Mary Agnes Court could not fail to recognize her old brutalizer, the ex-queen and former hit woman of the girls' division. "I think you've had enough popcorn, sweetheart," Patty Callahan told Mary Agnes, who appeared to have a kernel of that stuff caught in her throat. For the rest of the evening's frivolous entertainment, Mary Agnes could not keep her eyes off the dominant member of the audience. In Mary Agnes Cork's opinion, Melanie could have wiped up every dance floor with Fred Astaire. She could have broken every bone in Fred's slender body. She could have paralyzed him after just one waltz. All right, be right back. I have to use the restroom. Stand by. BRB. All right, be right back. I'm back to finish the fight with Chapter 8, Part 1. Okay. Whew. Hell yeah. It was the ball bearings. Was it the ball bearings or what else? Mary Agnes Cork. I don't know. The ball bearings or Mary Agnes Cork. Okay. One of the two. Maybe both was like the 1-2 punch of Chapter 8. All right, now, where was I? Yeah, one waltz. You see someone you know, dear? Ted Callahan asked Mary Agnes. She thought the poor girl was so stuffed with popcorn she couldn't talk. In the lobby, in the sickly neon light, Mary Agnes walked up to Melanie as if a dream led her feet, as if she were captured in the old violent trance of Melanie's authority. "Hi," she said. "You talking to me, kid?" Lorna asked, but Mary Agnes was smiling just at Melanie. "Hi, it's me," Mary Agnes said. "So you got out?" Melanie said. "I've been adopted," said Mary Agnes Cork. Ted and Patty stood a little nervously near her, not wanting to intrude, not wanting to let her very far from sight either. "It is Ted and Patty," Mary Agnes said. "This is my friend Melanie." Melanie appeared not to know what to make of the hands extended to her. The tough little broad named Lorna batted her eyes, some of her mascara sticking one of her eyelids in a frozen open position. "This is my friend Lorna," Melanie said awkwardly. "Hello," everyone said hi, and then stood around. What does the little creep want? Melanie was thinking. That was when Mary Agnes said, "Where's Homer?" "What?" Melanie said. Homer Wells, said Mary Agnes. Isn't he with you? Why? Melanie asked. Those pretty people with the car, Mary Agnes began. What car? Melanie asked. It wasn't the same car, it wasn't the pretty car, but there was the apple in the door. I'll never forget that apple, Mary Agnes said. Melanie put her big hands heavily on Mary Agnes' shoulders. Mary Agnes felt the weight pressing her into the floor. What are you talking about? Melanie asked. I saw an old car, but it had an apple on it. Mary Agnes said, I thought they was at the movie. Those pretty people. Homer, too. When I saw you, I thought he would be here for sure. Where was the car? Melanie asked, her strong thumbs bearing down on both of Mary Agnes's collarbones. Show me the car. Something wrong? Ted Callahan asked. He's like, what? What's going on here? Mind your own business, Melanie said. But the van was gone. The damp, cold on the slushy sidewalk, staring at the empty curbstone, Melanie said, Are you sure it was that apple? It had a double W, and it said Ocean View. That's it, Marianne said. It just wasn't the same car. It was an old van. But I'd know that apple anywhere. You don't forget a thing like that. Oh, shut up, Melanie said tiredly. She stood on the curb, her hands on her hips, her nostrils flared. She was trying to pick up a scent, the way a dog guesses in the air for the history of intrusions upon its territory. What is it? Lauren asked Melanie. Was your fella here with his rich cunt? Ted and Petty Callahan were anxious to take Mary Agnes home, but Melanie stopped them as they were leaving. She reached into her tie pocket and produced her horn-rimmed beret that Mary Agnes had stolen from Candy, which Melanie had taken for herself. Melanie gave the beret to Mary Agnes. Keep it, Melanie said. You took it. It's yours. Mary Agnes clutched the beret as if it were a medal for bravery, for valorous conduct in the only arena that Melanie respected. Hope I see ya, Mary Agnes called after Melanie, who was stalking away. The escaping Homer Wells might be around the next corner. What color was the van? Melanie called. Green, said Mary Agnes. I hope I see ya, she repeated. You ever hear of an ocean view? Melanie yelled back at the Callahans. They hadn't. What are apples to antique dealers? Can I see you sometime? Mary Agnes asked Melanie. At the shipyards, Melanie told the girl. If you ever hear of an ocean view, you can see me. You don't know it was him, Lorna said to Melanie later. They were drinking beer. Melanie wasn't talking. You don't know if the rich cunt is still with him. They stood on the bank of the foggy Kennebec near the boarding house where Lorna lived. They finished a beer. They're at the bottle end of the river. Melanie was good at throwing things into rivers. She kept her face turned up. She was still smelling the wind. So even that wisp of Candy's pubic hair could not escape her powers of detection. Morpheus was also making a deposit in the water. Boink, said the snails he threw off Ray Kendall's dock. Sea made just the smallest sound in swallowing snails. Boink. Candy and Homer sat with their backs against the opposite corner post at the end of the dock. If they both stretched out their legs to each other, the soles of their feet could have touched, but Candy sat with her knees slightly bent, in a position familiar to Homer Wells from his many views of women in stirrups. Is it okay? Candy asked quietly. Is what okay? He asked. Your heart, she whispered. How could he tell? I guess so, he said. It'll be okay, she said. What'll be okay? Asked Homer Wells. Everything, Candy said hurriedly. Everything, repeated Homer Wells. Me loving you, that's okay. You loving me and Wally, that's okay too, right? He said. You have to wait and see, Candy said. For everything, you have to wait and see. Right. I don't know what to do either, said Candy helplessly. We have to do the right thing, Homer Wells said. Wally would want to do the right thing. Larch was doing what he thought was the right thing too. You could be patient enough to wait and see. The right thing must present itself, mustn't it? What else does an orphan do anyway but wait and see? I can be patient. I can be patient, said Homer Wells. Melanie could be patient too, and Ray Kendall at his window above his dock. He could be patient too. A mechanic is also patient. A mechanic has to wait for something to break before he can fix it. Ray stared at the distance between his daughter's feet and the feet of Homer Wells. It was not much of a distance, and he had observed his daughter on his dock many times in Wally's arms. Before that, when Candy and Wally had also sat on the dock with their feet not touching. There were three good kids, Ray was thinking. He was a mechanic. He knew better than to interfere. When it breaks, then he would fix it. He felt sorry for them all. He'd drive you back to school tomorrow, Homer said. My dad can drive me back, Candy said. I think he likes to. Olive Worthington looked at the clock on her night table and turned out her reading lamp. Homer never stayed out late with Deborah Pettigrew, she was thinking. Olive had no trouble imagining Candy's attraction to Homer Wells. Olive had the greatest respect for Homer's diligence. She had seen him be a better student, and of the rabbit, of all things, than Wally had ever been. He knew he was a reliable and friendly companion, too. Olive fumed to herself. She felt the typical contradiction a parent so often feels, completely on her son's side. She even wanted to warn him to help his cause. At the same time, Wally could stand to be taught a lesson, just maybe not this lesson, Olive thought. Thank goodness, they're three nice people, she said aloud, her own voice in an empty house surprising her and thoroughly waking her up. Some hot chocolate would be soothing, she thought. When Homer Wells comes home, he can have some with me. But in the kitchen, Olive was struck by how the fog shot through the cloudy moonlight made the raft in the swimming pool look quite ghostly. The raft was poised at the side of the pool, half in the water and half out like a very gray and shadowy photograph of itself. The image disturbed her. Olive decided she had enough of that raft. Put on a pair of boots and a long winter coat over her nightgown. It bothered her that the outdoor patio light was not working. Only the underwater lights would turn on. She was surprised to see that the water in the pool had finally frozen. That was the reason for the raft's arrested position, strapped as rigidly as a statue like a ship seized in an ice floe. Being careful to hold tight to the pool curb, she kicked tentatively at the ice with the heel of her boot. When she tugged the raft, it would not come free. We'll walk out there. I'll fall right through, she thought. That was when Homer came home. She heard the van in the driveway and she called to him. What do you want done with it? Homer asked Olive about the raft. I will go ahead and call it there. Chapter 8, Part 1. Finished. Finally. I know what bothers me more about Irving's writing style. His unnecessary descriptions, his unusual names, or his disturbing scenarios. I don't know what. It's just weird, man. Just weird. And yeah, it's part of a bigger discussion. Monogamy, right? I talked about this in today's episode. If someone likes her, chances are someone else likes her too. I mean, just look at TikTok. Beautiful girls, right? You have a bunch of boys. We used to call them simp lords. They would just follow girls around all day. That's all they do. But yeah, it is the way it is. And yeah, women farm the attention too online. They absolutely do. I think men do too, but it's to a significantly less extent. And I think it's much more rare. Anyway, in the context of this book, uh, I mean, Candy's reciprocating, so it's uh, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how Wally takes it, assuming he finds out. Um, yeah, I'm not really sure. It might be like a triangle, like a love triangle type scenario. Um, maybe Candy can have both, Homer and Wally. Maybe Candy just feels sorry for Homer. That's possible too, because she thinks he has a heart condition, so maybe it's like just pity. It's not actual love, it's just pity. She's like, I feel bad for him, so I'll just say I love him. Because I'm afraid the disappointment is gonna give him a heart attack or something like that. I don't know. I don't really know what Kenny's thinking, frankly. I don't know. Okay. But that should do it for today. I will be back tomorrow with the second half of chapter 8. Stay tuned for that. We are in the final stretch now in the final four chapters. So today, tomorrow we'll be finishing chapter 8. Wednesday, I'll be starting chapter 9. Thursday, I'll be finishing chapter 9, at least in my expectation. And then next week will be chapters 10 and 11. Let me just double check that really fast. I'm pretty sure there are 11 chapters. Let me double check. Yes. Yes. So, yeah, we will have 7 more episodes of Cider House Rules. We'll wrap up. I do think it's interesting the way Irving focuses on certain characters. Like, we haven't really seen as much from Larch. Like, Larch was one of the main characters in like the first several chapters, and even like heading into like chapter 5, chapter 6. Larch was still a pretty significant character, and it's like over time, in the context of the novel, the focus has shifted from Larch to Homer Wells. Right now, it's focused more on Homer Wells, Andy instead of Melanie, even though Melanie is still a character. Um, Even like there's a different significance assigned to different characters over time. Wally's a good example of this too, where he was a significant character and now he is uh, kind of fading away. I think he's going to be pulled into the war or something along those lines. So, thank you so much for watching. Please remember to support the show. If you're on TikTok, like, comment, follow, donation to Film Store Show, please and thank you. All support is very much appreciated. If you're on YouTube, like, comment, share, subscribe, donation, Film Store Show. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've all enjoyed this episode. I'll be back tomorrow with more Cider House Rules. Sleep tight. Have a good night. Stormer Show signing off.